The gavel comes down, cameras pop, and the courtroom trembles with anticipation. And at the center of it all is Kody Brown, the proud patriarch of a giant family turned accused betrayer, secret bank account holder, and deed forger. His wives, once united by loyalty, now sit as his most bitter adversaries. This isn't a family fight. This is a courtroom battle over land, dollars, and faith. And with each secret revealed, Sister Wives' empire starts to dismantle before the eyes of the world. And the jury. The gavel came down with a resounding crash on the bench, the sound ringing through the courtroom like the crack of thunder, and the room fell silent in an instant. A silence not peace but tension, so fine it shaved through the air. Reporters wrote feverishly in notebooks, cameras flashed incessantly, and the full gallery crowded forward, suspended on every gesture, every look, every shudder in the air. Seated at the defendant's table was Kody Brown, once proud patriarch of a family renowned for being polygamist. His golden locks streaked with gray now were slicked back as if to present control, but the creases on his face gave away something else: strain, arrogance, and desperation meeting. Near the far wall, sitting shoulder to shoulder, were three of his ex-wives, Mary, Janelle, and Christine. For years they had vied for his attention, suffered jealousies, rivalries, and cold resentments. But today they were bound together by something more powerful than all of that: betrayal. The ground that had once represented their vision of togetherness, Coyote Pass, was now the emblem of Kody's perceived deceit. The judge's voice boomed out clear and authoritative. This court will hear the case of Kody Brown versus the sister wives. The world went on pause. Even Robin, the sole wife who remained at Kody's side, squeezed his arm with noticeable tension. She attempted to exude loyalty, but her fingers quivered. She knew the cameras were recording everything. The faithful wife standing up for her husband publicly, even though suspicion swirled in her mind. The gallery erupted with muttering, the sort that mounts like a storm cloud before lightning. Fans and critics and strangers had come for this spectacle, all eager to witness how this family once so legendary would fall apart under oath. Christine's attorney stepped forward first, adjusting his tie with melodramatic flourish. He wasted no time with niceties. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he intoned, voice deep and piercing, "this case is not about mismanagement. It is not about misunderstandings. It is about betrayal, dishonesty, and deceit by a man who stood before the world as a head of his family, while secretly creating an empire for himself." He paced slowly through the courtroom, allowing the pressure to build. "We will demonstrate to you the checks. We will demonstrate to you the emails. We will show you how Kody Brown siphoned funds from the women you see seated here, his partners, his wives, and used those funds to enrich himself, leaving them in financial ruin." The jurors leaned forward, each one suddenly alive with curiosity. Gasps rippled across the room as Christine's lawyer held up a stack of yellowed checks, bound neatly with a rubber band. "These are the checks," he announced with a flourish. "Signed, dated, and stolen from accounts that were intended for the family." He represented that he was securing their future. In fact, he was constructing a fortress for himself. Brick by brick, dollar by dollar. He dumped the bundle on the evidence table with a hard thud that appeared to resound throughout the courtroom. Christine sat quietly, her face lighting up with contained triumph. She had been waiting for this day for years. Janelle wrote furious notes in her leather journal, her lips compressed into a thin line of determination. Mary shifted restlessly, biting her lip as the weight of the evidence bore down on her previous allegiance. Robin's eyes flicked fearfully to Kody, silently begging him to remain calm, to keep himself in check, but Kody's fists were clutching the table so hard his knuckles had turned white. The judge gazed at Kody for a moment, then at the lawyer. "You may proceed." Christine's attorney stepped back to the jury once more, pacing methodically. "This isn't just about land. This is about trust. This guy," he jabbed a finger at Kody, "sold his wives a Coyote Pass dream, a dream of houses in which all would have their own space, their own security." And in front of the cameras he smiled. He preached on about being together. But behind the smiles, behind the preaching, he was removing them from the equation, transaction by transaction. Reporters wrote all the faster. This was the quote that would top every front page. Kody finally lost it, slamming his hand on the table. That's a lie. They don't know what sacrifices I made. His voice thundered, shaking with rage. The courtroom gasped. The gavel of the judge came down hard. Mr. Brown, you will be quiet until spoken to, or I will find you in contempt. Kody slumped back in his chair, panting, his eyes shifting between the jury and his wives. For the first time there was a glimmer of something new in his face. Not anger, not pride, but fear. Christine's attorney smiled weakly, recognizing the shift of power. He looked away from the evidence. You will notice exchanges of emails where Mr. Brown himself speaks of private reserves and accounts the wives need not know about. You will notice the arithmetic does not deceive. Thousands and thousands, directed into hidden places. He referred to being their leader, but he was their thief. The crowd grunted louder now, like a wave building toward a crest. A woman in the crowd covered her mouth with her hand, wide eyes. A man shook his head in incredulity. The tension was electric, the kind that makes an average trial into something that's being followed across the country. Mary shifted once again in her seat, her face pale. Memories whirled in her head. Nights of standing up for Kody when others didn't believe in him. The shame of the catfish scandal. The repeated assurances to herself that he loved them the same. Her devotion now seemed shackles. Janelle, on the other hand, appeared to have arrived ready for battle. She riffled through pages of notes, figures, and numbers scribbled in neat lines, prepared to provide cold, hard evidence for the prosecution's assertions. Christine sat upright as she had not done for years, her chin high, her eyes locked on Kody like a woman who had at last broken free from the prison of silence. Robin dug her fingers into Kody's arm until they were the color of red. She muttered something under her breath, but Kody dismissed her, shooting daggers at Christine's attorney as if mere hate could incinerate the proof into nothingness. The judge at last spoke. We will now accept these checks into evidence. The bailiff gathered them, securing them with a metallic click. Each noise felt amplified in the room. The click of the pen, the rustle of paper, the tap of heels against tile floor. It was as if the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for the next fissure in Kody Brown's well-rehearsed facade. Christine's attorney concluded his opening by addressing the jury once again. At the conclusion of this trial, you will realize that Coyote Pass is more than land. It is a testament to deceptions. And when the truth comes fully out, the only just verdict will be that Kody Brown lied to the very women who placed their trust in him most. The judge nodded and motioned for the defense to ready. The audience hummed louder now, whispers ringing out, tension spilling over. Kody smoothed his tie, struggling to regain his calm, but sweat glistening on his brow betrayed him. Robin offered him a tissue, but her eyes betrayed uncertainty. Uncertainty that the cameras would pick up and amplify. The gavel rang again. Court is in recess. But the jury had not yet had a chance to rise when Christine's attorney held up his hand and announced, Your Honor, before we recess we request permission to call our first witness, Janelle Brown. The courtroom gasped once more. Janelle stood up, gathering up her spreadsheets and notes, her eyes flashing with the placid anger of a woman who had been underestimated one time too often. And just as the jury leaned forward, hungry for more, the action was halted in suspense. The moment when the first blow was to fall against Kody's empire. The courtroom hummed back to life, when the recess was over. But the tension hadn't dissipated. It had coalesced like smoke. The bailiff asked for order, and everyone shuffled back into position. The jurors came back, some holding new cups of coffee, others wearing the faces of questioning and curiosity, but all of them bearing the burden of what they had just seen in session 1. Christine's attorney had vowed proof of lying, and now it was time to delve into the nitty-gritty of it. The judge nodded. Proceed with the prosecution. And the light then shone on Janelle Brown, who stood with a quietness that bordered on the unnatural in the maelstrom surrounding her. She was no fiery Christine, with her determination. No Mary with her silent agony. Janelle was the statistics, the data, the living balance sheet of a family that had boasted of having nothing between them. She paced to the stand, her steps measured, her gaze straight ahead, her chin up. When she sat down and took the oath, She did so in the firm voice of a woman who had waited a long time for this moment. Christine's attorney paced slowly, sensing the importance of what was to happen. Mrs. Janelle Brown, he started, his voice resonating over the room. You handled a lot of the family finances, didn't you? Janelle pushed her glasses up her nose and nodded once. Yes, I did the budgets, paid the bills, and attempted to keep us afloat. And while you were doing so, did you observe anomalies? Her mouth formed a line. Not so much anomalies. Patterns. Logics that did not add up if we were all in this together. I kept the ledgers. I saw accounts drain quicker than they could be explained. I asked questions. Questions dismissed. She pulled out a fat binder, full of pages that sounded like the wings of caged birds. She flipped to a marked page and held it up. This is one of dozens of spreadsheets I've prepared. See the withdrawals. Thousands withdrawn from our joint accounts at irregular times, without a trace of where it went. Each time I questioned him, Kody waved me off. He said it was for the family, for investments, for our future. The attorney picked up the binder, holding it out for the jury to see. They leaned forward, eyes scanning the figures underlined in yellow. One juror raised an eyebrow. Another shook her head. The effect was swift. Janelle went on, speaking more level now. I wanted to trust him. I kept trusting him, even when the numbers cried otherwise. But when Christine began questioning me about Coyote Pass, about when we would finally construct the homes we were promised, I realized those funds never had been invested for us. They were spent. Disappeared. She directed a piercing look at Kody, who squirmed in his chair, his lips curling with repressed anger. The prosecutor moved closer. Mrs. Brown, are you stating before this court that Mr. Kody Brown deliberately lied to you and your other wives about the family's financial health? Janelle's response was cutthroat. Yes, he led us to hope for a future he never constructed. The gallery erupted with grumblings, folks whispering so boisterously the judge had to pound the gavel. Order, the jury will ignore the gallery reactions. But the seed had been sown. Kody's attorney stood up in a swift objection, striding toward the witness stand. Objection, Your Honor. This isn't fraud. This is a family conflict. Families make financial decisions all the time, and disagreements don't make them crimes. But Christine's lawyer pounced. Then let's move to the emails. He pulled out printed sheets, flipping through them like a deck of damning cards. Exhibit B. Emails directly from Mr. Brown, referring to what he called private reserves. He held one up. We'll keep this account quiet. Less stress if they don't know. Signed, Kody Brown. Gasps filled the air. The heads of the jury turned to regard Kody at the same time, as if they were seeing a man divested of all his clothing. The defense lawyer attempted to grab the page for inspection, but the judge permitted it as evidence. Kody leaned back in his chair, his fists flexed, his teeth grinding. Robin put her hand on his arm, saying something too soft to hear. But even her encouragement was not enough to prevent the cameras from capturing the beads of perspiration trickling down his temple. Janelle tilted forward from the waist, her gaze hardening as she stared at him. You always said we were partners. You spoke of honesty, openness, family harmony, and behind closed doors, you referred to us as stress. We were not partners to you. We were roadblocks. Again, a hush fell. Even Mary, stiffly seated with hands clasped together, let a single tear fall down her face. Christine nodded subtly, her face a mask of vindication. The prosecution leaned in. Mrs. Brown, do you have any idea where all those funds ended up? Janelle nodded, turning another page in her binder. Partially, some were put into vehicles, some into properties we never knew about, and some simply vanished. But all the trails lead to him. She pointed at Kody, her finger unshakable. He wanted power, control, and he didn't care what it cost us. The defense lawyer sprang to his feet once more. Speculation, emotional testimony, not fact. But Christine's attorney had anticipated this. Then let's hear from another witness. He addressed the judge. We call Christine Brown. The courtroom came alive once more. The movement of feet, the rumors flying. Christine rose, her face fierce, almost melodramatic in its assurance. Stepping to the witness stand, she gave Kody a burning look. After being sworn in, she didn't waste any time. Years I asked when we developed Coyote Pass. He kept telling me excuse after excuse, permits, zoning, delays. But behind the excuses, he was already making moves we didn't know about. She pointed across the evidence table. That land wasn't for us. It was for him and Robin. The attorney asked, "And what are you referring to?" Christine reached into her purse and produced a crumpled piece of paper. "That is a letter I received from a contractor, stating that he had been approached by Kody and Robin in private, asking him about constructing a big house. Not 4, not 5 individual houses. One house, for them." She passed it to the bailiff, who presented it to the judge. The judge read in silence, his face darkening. The prosecution's case was pounding like waves against a weak dam, each one more powerful than the previous. Jurors were whispering, eyes open wide, some nodding their heads in shock. Live coverage was streaming outside the courthouse. Commentators were arguing on TV if this would be the ultimate downfall of the sister wives' empire. Kody could no longer keep it in. He jumped up, his voice thundering in the courtroom. "They're manipulating everything. None of this is what it seems. I gave for this family, gave everything. And this is the way they show their gratitude?" He pounded his fist on the table, the slam echoing like another gavel. The judge's own gavel fell at once. "Mr. Brown, one more comment, and you will be taken from this courtroom." The silence that followed was oppressive. But the harm was done. His fury, his defiance, his refusal to be represented by lawyers, all of it created an image of a man unstable, a man cornered. Robin's face lost color. Her mouth set tightly as she glanced around, seeing that each camera had recorded the moment. Each juror had sensed his anger. Each ex-wife had witnessed the facade slip. The prosecutor didn't even need to add much. He rested on the quiet, then spoke softly, but intensely. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this isn't the voice of a confused man. This is the voice of an exposed man." He nodded at Janelle again, still seated in the witness stand, then continued. "Thank you, Mrs. Brown. No further questions." The defense attempted to rebound, probing Janelle about family disorder, about arguments, about the inevitable messiness of plural marriage. But Janelle would not yield. Disagreements don't empty accounts. Arguments don't create forgeries. Families may argue, but families don't betray one another like this. The defense lawyer let out a sigh, and saw that the harm was done, and released her from the witness stand. The judge called for a brief recess. The jurors stood, their faces still creased from the burden of what they'd listened to. But before anyone could take a step, Robin caught Kody's sleeve. "You must stop," she breathed, her whisper so sharp it could cut. But Kody didn't hear her, or wouldn't. His glare was still fixed on Christine, on Janelle, on Mary. His kingdom was doomed, and the more he struggled, the quicker it crashed. As order was called and individuals started to exit, reporters dashed to the doors, yelling queries that rang through the chamber like ricochets. "Kody, did you conceal the money? Christine, is it accurate that he intended to cut you out of Coyote Pass? Janelle, how long had you been aware?" The turmoil outside echoed the turmoil inside, a whirlwind of flashing lights, microphones and voracious voices. And yet, within, one truth hung in the dry courtroom air. The prosecution had been able to draw blood, and the jury had witnessed it. What next would determine it all. But for now the Brown family sat in silence. Silence of a legacy unraveling under the burden of numbers, checks, and words that could not be erased. Would you like me to now develop Session 3 into 1,500 words, with the same rich detail and cinematic courtroom suspense? The courtroom doors groaned as the jury returned from recess. But the mood had shifted. What had begun as curiosity now had an undercurrent of something darker, suspicion, perhaps even judgment. Kody sat rigidly at the defense table, his jaw so locked in place it seemed his teeth would crack. His attorney crouched beside him, whispering admonitions, reminding him to remain calm, to allow the defense to regain momentum after the prosecution's incendiary blows. But Kody wasn't constructed for quiet. His pride was a furnace, and it roared hotter every time he saw Christine smirking, Janelle calmly jotting notes, or Mary's face streaked with silent tears. Robin's hand rested on his arm like an anchor, her fingers icy against his skin. She knew the storm that was about to hit. The defense attorney, a tall man in a gray suit, rose and cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he started, walking slowly in front of them. "You've just listened to a story full of numbers, accusations, and interpretation. But ask yourselves, was it fraud? Or was it heartbreak? Was it deception? Or was it a man under the burden of unrealistic expectations, attempting to hold together a family who decided to turn on him?" He pointed at Kody. This man spent decades constructing a home, leading his family through public opprobrium, financial hardship, and the ordeal of plural marriage. He made choices, yes, some unpopular, some misinterpreted. But fraud? No. These women understood the risks. They understood the sacrifices. And when the going got tough, they left him, then vilified him. The attorney's tone softened, nearly sympathetic. "You've witnessed families quarrel. You've seen disputes over money. But must disputes, distrust, and the acrimony of shattered relationships be confused with criminal fraud? We say no." He paused, allowing the words to resonate. A few jurors nodded slightly. Others maintained blank faces. He suddenly turned to Mary. "Mrs. Mary Brown. Of all people, you know how personal difficulties can impair judgment." Christine's attorney leapt up at once. "Objection." The judge's brow furrowed. "Where are you going?" The defense lawyer fiddled with his tie. "To demonstrate that personal betrayals, family dynamics, and personal errors, not financial deception, underlie this case." The judge let him tread carefully. The attorney started pacing around the courtroom, his phrases slicing more intensely now. "Mary, you also had a scandal of your own, didn't you? An affair on the internet that almost broke up the family. Did Kody leave you then?" "No. He supported you, stood by your side when the world ridiculed you." "And Christine?" "Yes. Christine? How many interviews have you done after you left? How many times did you publicly berate him, spin tales, capitalize on his name, while presenting yourself as the martyr? Janelle, you were always the free spirit, always challenging his leadership, forging your own course. And when it all fell apart, you showed up here, prepared to hurl rocks." Gasps spread throughout the gallery, the defense's words landing like personal blows. Mary cast her eyes down to her lap, shame flickering across her countenance. Christine's jaw clenched, her eyes blazing with fire, while Janelle kept a cool head, waiting for her chance to speak. The attorney, perceiving the change, pushed more forcefully. "This is not about secret accounts or forged signatures. This is about a broken family, one that was not strong enough to stay together. And now, instead of taking responsibility for their part in its failure, these women want you to find him guilty of crimes he did not commit." The jury shifted back, torn between the defense's appeal to emotions and the prosecution's charts. But before the defense attorney could even enjoy the moment, Christine's attorney rose, his tone as cutting as a knife. "Your Honor, if this is going to be an argument about family loyalty, then let's have some talk about loyalty from the one wife still standing by his side." He dramatically lifted a sealed envelope. "Here is Exhibit C, a notarized signed letter by Robin Brown herself, admitting knowledge of the purported private reserves." The courtroom gasped like a simultaneous deep breath. Robin's eyes went wide, her face paling. The defense attorney stuttered. "Your Honor, we must confirm," but the judge raised a hand. "Admitted. Continue." The prosecutor approached Robin slowly, like a predator stalking its prey. "Mrs. Robin Brown, did you write this letter or did you not?" Robin's lips shook. She kept her eyes from Kody, fixating instead on the letter as a snake coiled and ready to strike. I, she stuttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Kody moved in tightly on her, hissing in her ear, his face inches from hers, his words venom hissing. Photographers scribbled wildly, cameras zoomed in. Christine leaned forward, ravenous for the response. Janelle sat stiff, pen stuck in mid-word. Mary dabbed at her eyes, caught between vindication and despair. At last Robin's voice pierced, shaky but unmistakable. "Yes, I wrote it." The courtroom erupted. Gasps, whispers, shouts, the thud of hands slapped over mouths in shock. Reporters rushed to send out tweets, whisper, send word around the world. Robin slumped her shoulders, as if the weight of years had fallen on her in an instant. Kody's face contorted red, a blend of rage and betrayal. "You betrayed me," he spat, his voice loud enough to ripple across the microphones. The judge bashed his gavel. "Order in the court. Order." But the melee diminished only halfway. Robin trembled in the witness box, tears welling, her fists clasped tightly. The defense lawyer stammered, attempting to spin it. She misunderstood. She was coerced. "This letter does not mean what they claim." But the phrases sounded hollow now. The jury was not blind. They had witnessed her breakdown. Christine's attorney came in for the kill. "Mrs. Brown, you indicated that Kody just wanted to keep the family safe. By signing this letter, you acknowledged you were aware of accounts the other wives were not. Protection or trickery?" Robin covered her face with her hands. "I thought I was protecting him. I thought if I stood with him, he would protect us. But I didn't know." She trailed off into tears. The noise could be heard throughout the room, heavy with sorrow. Kody's anger overflowed. He sprang to his feet once more, his fingers stabbing at Christine. "You manipulated her. You always despised her. You poisoned her against me." Christine didn't blink. She looked at him with cold eyes. "You did it all by yourself, Kody." The gavel came down again, more loudly, more sharply, practically shattering the wood. The judge's voice boomed. "Mr. Brown, one more interruption, and I will hold you in contempt." Kody leaned back again, his chest pumping, his fists clenched on the table, until the veins stood out. Robin's tears continued to flow, smudging the makeup she had so carefully applied. The jury sat in shocked silence. The image was no longer that of a misunderstood husband, but of a man coming apart before their eyes. The defense lawyer stumbled, attempting to regain ground. "The Brown family has always been under a microscope. Every choice criticized, every error exaggerated. This letter indicates nothing more than the bewilderment of a family torn apart. This is not fraud. This is dysfunction." But even as he uttered the words, they felt empty. The prosecution had struck its blow. Robin had broken, and the jury had witnessed it. The hearing bogged down into shouting matches, objections, sidebars at the bench. Reporters outside posted updates. Robert Brown's secret letter uncovered, loyalty shatters. Commentators guesstimated the aftermath. In the courtroom, the Brown's silence was louder than any witness. Testimony ceased as Christine sat up proud, her chin lifted as if justice was finally catching up. Undefined Danelle tapped her pen relentlessly, serene as stone. Undefined. Mary cried softly, the combination of sadness and freedom. Undefined. Robin sat shattered, her loyalty broken. And Kody, his face red and seething, sat in the remnants of his own empire, glaring at the jury as if his look alone could alter their decisions. Then the judge leaned forward, his face solemn. "We will reconvene tomorrow morning. But first, before we adjourn, the court has a matter. Mrs. Robin Brown, you will be back tomorrow to finish your testimony. And Mr. Brown, rein yourself in, or be taken out of these proceedings." The gavel struck once, twice, thrice. As everyone filed out, the air hummed with shock. The wives exited in a group. A solidarity of women, camera flashes everywhere around them. Kody sat still, his eyes on Robin with a burst of betrayal that could slice flesh. Robin did not meet his gaze. Her sniffles now gone, but her silence a greater condemnation than any words he could use. And in that silence, the narrative changed. The jury had noticed the fissures. The world had watched it fall apart. Kody Brown was no longer the self-assured leader of sister wives. He was a man pushed into a corner, and the trial had just gotten underway. The courtroom air was heavy the following morning, so heavy it clung to each individual who passed through those double doors. The jury filed back in, their countenances pinched with expectation. Journalists were already taking notes in their notebooks before the judge's appearance, their cameras focused on the vacant witness stand. Everyone knew would become Robin Brown's within minutes. The gavel came down, 3 firm thuds, and silence descended immediately. The judge's voice was crisp. "Mrs. Robin Brown, come forward." The tension drew tight as a rope around the room. Robin stood up slowly, her trembling hands, white face. She smoothed the front of her dress with shaking fingers. But that did nothing to calm her nerves. She made her way to the witness stand, heels striking tile floor like pistol shots. All eyes were on her. Her allegiance to Kody had been her name, her shield, her sword. Today, it would be tested on oath. She was sworn in and sat down, back ramrod straight, hands folded tightly in her lap. The prosecutor took a step closer, his voice steady but authoritative, like a predator stalking its prey. Mrs. Brown, yesterday we presented as evidence a letter signed by you, admitting to knowing about private funds being withheld from the other wives. Do you acknowledge this as your signature? Itu Rakivan and Tuz as. Robin's eyes darted to Kody, who was glowering at her with an intensity that teetered on rage. She attempted to say something, but her throat closed. At last, she pushed the word out. Yes? The courtroom gasped in unison. Some of the gallery members whispered so loudly that the bailiff bellowed for order. Pens wrote madly across reporters' pads. The prosecutor huddled in. And when you signed this letter, did you know that those accounts were kept concealed from Mary, Janelle, and Christine? Robin swallowed hard. I knew he hadn't told them everything. The lawyer pushed. So you acknowledge you knew the accounts were there, and you knew the others didn't know about them. Her voice broke. Yes, but she paused, tears pricking in her eyes. Kody lurched forward, whispering harshly at her. Don't do this. His voice, though low, had just enough volume to be picked up by microphones. The judge's gavel came down. Mr. Brown, you will say nothing. Robin stood there, caught between the anger of her husband and the call of the truth. The prosecutor didn't relent. Mrs. Brown, why did you not share with the other wives about the accounts? Robin's tears overflowed. She shook her head, struggling to explain. He said it would be for their good. He said that if they understood, it would create more tension, more bickering. He swore he was looking out for us all. Christine's voice cracked on a harsh laugh that rang out in the courtroom. Beyond her control. Protecting us? He stole from us. The judge hushed her, but it was too late. The words hung there, irrefutable. The prosecutor leaned in again. Mrs. Brown, do you think now that he was shielding you, or lying to you? Robin's lip trembled. She glanced at Kody, whose eyes drilled into hers like daggers. Then at Christine, Janelle, and Mary. 3 women who had once been her sisters. The silence dragged on agonizingly, until at last, her voice came out barely above a whisper. I don't know anymore. The courtroom erupted once more whispers. Gasps, reporters rushing to get the shot. Robin Brown, the devoted wife, the one who had remained with Kody while all others walked out, had snapped. Her conviction was lost. The judge slammed the gavel, commanding silence, but the emotion couldn't be suppressed. The jurors leaned forward, whispering amongst themselves, pens scratching madly against paper. The defense lawyer hurried over, in a frantic attempt to mend the damage. Mrs. Brown, didn't you sign that letter under duress, that you were misled by the prosecution's interpretation? Robin's head shook, as she wiped at cheeks wet with tears. No one pressured me. I signed it because he wanted me to. Because I trusted him. She looked at Kody, then continued, voice shaking, because I was afraid not to. That final sentence exploded in the room like a grenade. Gasps resounded once more. Christine's eyes grew wide. Janelle's face set. Mary clapped her hand over her mouth. Even the jurors seemed shocked, eyes flying to one another. The defense attorney stuttered. Afraid? Afraid of what? Robin's voice broke, but she said it anyway. Afraid that if I didn't, he'd turn on me like he turned on them. Kody's face burst red. He leapt to his feet, bellowing. That's a lie. You're turning this around. I never. The gavel came down again, and again. Mr. Brown, sit down. The judge's face was thunderous, his temper thin. You are one outburst away from contempt of court. Kody sank back into his chair, his chest pumping, his fists clenched. Robin wept harder, shaking her shoulders. She hid her face in her hands. The prosecutor moved back, allowing the silence to hang, allowing the jury to take in every word. No further questions, he said, his tone even but victorious. The defense attorney paused, then moved forward once again, but the jury was no longer looking at him. They were looking at Robin. the woman they had seen disintegrate piece by piece on the stand. He attempted to mollify his tone. "Mrs. Brown, you love your husband, don't you?" Slowly Robin looked up from her tears. Sheldon nodded. Sheldon nodded. "Yes." He leaned in harder. "So isn't it accurate to say that all of this letter, this testimony, was the work of a devoted wife, attempting to stand by her husband in bad times?" Robin paused, then breathed softly. "Yes, but loyalty doesn't make it right." The defense lawyer stood, stunned, knowing that she had just dug his grave deeper. He retreated, defeated. The judge waved her aside for the time being, but the breakdown hung in the air, heavy and unshakable. She rose from the witness stand slowly, not meeting Kody's glare, her body shaking as she returned to her chair. She sat down next to him, but the air between them was dense with distance. Kody angled his body away, eyes forward, jaw tight. The judge glanced at the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you that you are to concentrate on what evidence has been presented before you, not what is being felt in this room. And yet, you have had testimony brought forth before you today that will burden your judgment." He hesitated, then spoke. "We will recess briefly." But before the jury could stand, the foreman held up a hand. A bailiff hastened over, grabbed a folded piece of paper, and delivered it to the judge. The judge unfolded it, his brow furrowing. As he read, he laid it down slowly, his face somber. "The jury has a question," he stated. The gallery fell silent, trying to listen. They would like to see the original deed to Coyote Pass. The room gasped once more, the sound booming like thunder around the walls. Christine clutched Janelle's arm, her voice low and furious. "This is it. This is the nail in the coffin." Mary was crying freely now, her shoulders heaving. Robin covered her eyes, knowing what was to come, while Kody's eyes went wide, panic dancing in the depths. Reporters sprinted out of the room, yelling into their phones. "Jury requests deed. Trial takes dramatic turn." The judge gave a nod of solemnity. "The bailiff will get the document. We will adjourn for a bit." His gavel came down, but the reverberations of the moment lingered in the room. Kody leaned back in his chair, his face white now, the anger diluted to fear. He said something indistinct under his breath, but no one heard. Robin sat stiff, her hands tightly clasped in her lap, gazing at the table. Christine, Janelle, and Mary were seated as a group, finally united, their gaze never leaving the man who had held all of them captive. As the room emptied out for recess, whispers swelled into a storm. Everyone knew what was brewing. The original deed would shout louder than testimony, louder than loyalty, louder than all of Kody's denials. And when it did, the silence of Coyote Pass would become a roar that even Kody Brown couldn't stifle. The gallery was on edge as the recess came to an end. Men muttered in strained voices. Camera crews rolled to repoint their equipment, and the jury came back with wiser eyes. The judge's voice rose above the murmurs. "The jury has asked to view the original deed to Coyote Pass. Bailiff, please bring it in." The room fell silent as the bailiff vanished behind a side door, returning with a heavy metal lockbox. The box was placed firmly on the evidence table, the thud ringing out like the portent of a revelation. Heads turned, breaths appeared to be held as the bailiff inserted a key into the lock, turned, and swung the lid open with a long metallic groan. It contained a lone folder, aged to a yellow that had become familiar to the court, its edges frayed. The bailiff drew out the document gingerly, putting it on the table. The prosecutor stood, holding the deed high enough for the jury to behold, and then placed it upon an overhead projector. The letters enlarged on a big screen. The courtroom leaned forward as one. On the screen, black bold ink registered the signatures of the wives. Mary, Janelle, Christine, and Robin, aligned in a row at the bottom. But even in the back of the room, something didn't look right. The handwriting didn't appear consistent. Letters were irregular, pressure inconsistent. The prosecutor moved closer, his voice crisp. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the deed to Coyote Pass, the very heart of this trial, signed supposedly by all the wives. But we will demonstrate to you that what you see here is not truth. It is manipulation. It is manipulation." He nodded toward an expert standing in the wings, a forensic handwriting analyst. The witness, a woman in her 60s with wire-rimmed glasses, stepped up before the jury with unobtrusive authority. She was sworn in, then handed the deed. She examined it intently, leafing through pages, her pen running down the path of each signature. The prosecutor inquired, "Can you tell the court what you see?" The witness nodded resolutely. "Yes, these signatures are not authentic. At least 3 of them were not written by the women they claim to represent. In my professional opinion, they were forged." The courtroom exploded with gasps. Reporters nearly fell over one another to get the words down. Mary's hand flew to her mouth, tears spilling instantly. Janelle's head shook slowly, her jaw clenched in rage. Christine sat back in her chair, whispering, "I knew it." Robin shut her eyes, mumbling prayers on her breath, and Kody thrashed back and forth, his cheeks flushed. The defense attorney jumped to his feet. "Objection, this is conjecture. Handwriting is subjective." The expert interrupted him, with measured force. "Handwriting analysis is founded on pressure, rhythm, stroke, and consistency. These signatures don't have the natural flow of genuine writing. In fact," she gestured toward the screen, "the signature supposedly from Mary Brown contains repeated identical loops, indicating that it was traced. The signature of Christine Brown contains hesitation marks, small stops and starts that signal forgery. And the signature of Janelle Brown is in handwriting that is not consistent with her known writing samples. These are not authentic." The jury scribbled furiously. The prosecutor pressed harder. "So you're telling this court that the central document of Coyote Pass, the deed itself, was falsified?" The expert nodded. "Yes, at least 3 of the signatures are not genuine. Someone else wrote them." The gavel slammed as the judge called for order, but the damage was irreversible. Christine's lawyer stepped forward, now, seizing the moment. He pointed straight at Kody. "Mr. Brown, you introduced this deed as genuine. You informed your wives, your family, and the world that this property would be divided equally. How do you account for this?" Kody sprang to his feet, voice exploding. "It's a lie. This is all lies. They signed it. They're bending everything." His voice broke with urgency, his poise disintegrating like grains of sand through his fingers. The gavel of the judge boomed once more. "Mr. Brown, sit down." But Kody wouldn't quit. "They wanted to destroy me from the very start. Christine has despised me for years. Janelle always doubted me. Mary betrayed me years before this. And Robin," his voice cracked, eyes flashing in her direction. "Robin knew it all. She knew what we had to do." Robin's face went white as a sheet. She shook her head violently, her voice cracking. "No, Kody, don't you touch this to me." She spun on the judge, shaking but her voice audible. "I didn't know he had forged anything. I never read the deed before today." The courtroom gasped once more, the air charged with betrayal. Kody's lips parted, but nothing emerged. For the first time, he seemed trapped, desperate, like a man drowning before all the people he had ever attempted to manipulate. The prosecutor stepped in, his voice thunderous with ultimatum. "Your Honor, this is fraud." Plain and simple, Kody Brown produced a deed with forged signatures, deceived his wives, deceived this court, and deceived the public. The facts are obvious. This land never was about family. It was about control. It was about greed. The faces of the jurors were somber, some of them shaking their heads, some of them gazing at Kody with narrowed eyes. Christine reached forward, her voice increasing. Not to the judge, not to the jury, but to Kody. "You took our dreams. You took our trust. And now the truth comes out at last." Janelle spoke up, her tone sharp as steel. "We trusted you with everything, and you falsified it all away." Mary, sobbing, whispered, "Even after all, I still trusted you. And this is what you hid." The judge held up a hand to silence the wives, but their words had already struck home. The jury had glimpsed their faces, had heard their anguish, felt their betrayal. It was raw, uncontrovertible testimony, without the need to swear. Kody sat back down hard, hunching his shoulders. The room closed in around him. Journalists leaned against each other and whispered frantically into phones, words like deed forgery and final nail circulating through the air. Robin sat alongside him, stiff and broken, her honor destroyed before the whole world. The defense lawyer attempted one final hopeless stab. "Your Honor, families do err. Emotions get the better of them. Even if there were discrepancies in the deed, That does not equate to intent on the part of Mr. Brown. It was clerical error. The judge interrupted him with a raised hand. Clerical error generates forged signatures. Counselor, sit down. The gavel fell again, and the judge spoke to the jury. You have now viewed the deed, heard expert testimony, and seen firsthand the cracks in this family. You will consider all of this evidence carefully. His gaze roamed the room. Court is adjourned until tomorrow morning. The gavel rang out like a funeral bell. The gallery burst into chaos as people stampeded for the doors, shouting, speculating, reporting. Outside, news announcers gasped the day's news. Forgery verified on Coyote Pass deed. Kody Brown cornered in courtroom suspense. Television cameras caught up with Christine, Janelle, and Mary exiting together side by side, their expressions stern yet determined, their solidarity certain. The reporters yelled questions. Microphones thrust forward. Christine, how do you feel following today's news? Mary, do you think this confirms Kody's culpability? Janelle, what's next? The women didn't respond, but their silence was deafening. Huddled inside, Kody sat for a long time after the courtroom cleared. His hands over his face, his chest heaving with labored breaths. Robin sat with him, her muscles tight, her gaze fixed straight ahead. She had been his protector, his trusted friend, his final faithful companion for so long. But now even she couldn't meet his eyes. The bailiff finally moved in. Mr. Brown, you must vacate the courtroom. Kody dropped his hands. His complexion red, his face smeared with sweat, his eyes crazed. He stood slowly, his shoulders drooping. As he exited the courtroom, reporters swarmed, their questions shooting like arrows. Kody, did you sign the signatures? Kody, is your day done? Kody, do you wish you had not betrayed your wives? He said nothing, only pushed through the flashing cameras and shouted accusations, his silence louder than any denial. And as the courthouse doors closed behind him, one truth lingered in the minds of everyone who had witnessed the day. The dream of Coyote Pass was dead, and the man who built it had destroyed it with his own hands. The morning of the verdict was unlike any other. Reporters had set up camp outside the courthouse before dawn, their cameras misted by the chill, their voices broadcasting live throughout the country. The trial of Kody Brown and his wives had been transformed into something more than a case. It had been transformed into a spectacle. A public disintegration of a man who had appeared in front of television cameras once as the proud father of sister wives. The news of the tampered deed to Coyote Pass had caught fire. Headlines were screaming betrayal. Networks ran repeat after repeat of Robin collapsing on the stand. And the social media was set alight with hashtags proclaiming #justice for the wives. Before the bailiff opened the doors to the courtroom, there had already been a crowd clamoring to get in, their faces tense with expectation of watching the climax of a tradition. Inside, the air was stifling. The jury entered, their faces somber, their notebooks heavy with scribbled writings from weeks of hearings. At the defense table, Kody sat stiff, his hair disheveled, his face pinched and pale. The defiance that had driven his rages had deteriorated into something more sinister: desperation. He drummed his fingers against the table, his eyes scanning the jury, then the judge, then back down. Next to him was Robin with her hands folded in her lap, her eyes straight ahead, her loyalty fractured but not shattered. She was less ally now, and more a woman caught in a tempest she no longer had the strength to manage. At the other end of the room, Christine, Janelle, and Mary sat as one, their union unspoken yet unbreakable. They did not look at each other often. They did not have to. They were silent, their silence being as powerful as the stillness that stood as a testament to decades of betrayal at last exposed. Christine's jaw was clenched in determination. Janelle's expression bore the serenity of a tactician. And Mary, while her eyes were red-rimmed with tears, sat upright for the first time in years, her voice unsaid but shrieking. Enough is enough. The gavel creaked in the judge's hand, and the room fell silent. This court is now back in session. Members of the jury, have you arrived at a verdict? The foreperson rose, crumpling a sheet of paper in his hand. The air swelled with tension. Hearts thudded, breaths caught. The prosecutor sat up straighter, Christine's attorney leaned forward, and Kody clenched the edge of the table, so hard his knuckles whitened. But before the foreperson could say a word, the judge held up a hand. One moment. Before we hear the verdict, I have been presented with new evidence. The courtroom exploded into gasps. Reporters jumped to their feet, whispering angrily. Kody's head jerked up, his face twisting. New evidence? What about? The judge overrode him. This evidence was received late last night. It relates directly to the financial transactions at issue and must be taken into consideration. The foreperson hesitated, folding the verdict back into their hand. The jury's eyes widened, some frustrated, others curious. Christine and Janelle exchanged a look, shocked but hungry for whatever bombshell was about to land. Mary leaned forward, clutching the edge of her seat. Robin froze, her lips parting in dread. The bailiff brought in a sealed envelope, setting it before the judge. The judge opened it unhurriedly, reading what was inside. His brow grew increasingly furrowed with each line. At last he spoke. The court has been presented with a string of checks and wire transfers, accompanied by accounts which had not been previously disclosed. Accounts that seemed to be associated with business units linked to Mr. Kody Brown. The room erupted into pandemonium. Journalists bellowed. More secret accounts. Is this the knockout blow? The judge pounded the gavel again and again. Order, order. The prosecutor stood, his voice loud. Your Honor, we respectfully ask to have these documents reviewed immediately. If what you are saying is accurate, this confirms the degree of Mr. Brown's deception is much larger than we even disputed. He turned, his voice increasing in authority. This isn't simply about Coyote Pass anymore. This is about years of manipulation, concealed riches, and betrayal. Kody leapt upright, his face red. No, this is a sham. They're making it all up. Those stories are not mine. His voice broke with urgency. But too late. The jury watched him, some in sympathy, most in outrage. His lawyer grasped at his arm, speaking wildly. But Kody pushed him aside, his frame convulsing with anger. Robin caught his arm, speaking quietly, but he pulled away from her as well. He was alone, stage center, vulnerable. Christine stood up, her voice cold and unyielding. Tell them, Kody, tell them where the money went. Tell them why you forged our signatures. Tell them why you built your fortune on our shoulders and claimed to love us. Her voice shook, not with fear, but with rage banked for long years. Janelle stood by her side. You lied to us. You lied to the children. And you lied to the world. You stole our futures and our dreams. Mary's was the next voice, smooth but sharp. You stole me too. You made me trust in you, even when everything else said not to. The gavel came down again. Sit down, all of you. But already their words had cut through the walls of the courtroom, directly into the ears of the jury and the listening public. The prosecutor took advantage of the moment. Your Honor, there cannot be a verdict today. These new accounts require full investigation. We move to postpone the verdict until the evidence has been reviewed. The judge heaved a deep sigh, nodded, motion granted. The jury will be excused pending further notice. The jury shuffled out grudgingly, their faces frustrated. They were prepared to render judgment, prepared to end this drama. But now they had to hold back. The tension extended, the suspense amplified. Reporters scrambled out of the building, their cries already echoing. Verdict postponed. Fresh evidence found. Outside, the courthouse steps were a war zone of microphones and cameras. Commentators spoke in wild guesses. Was this the ultimate blow to Kody, or would he manage to spin it around once more? Inside, the wives took their seats again, their faces anger-fretted and weary. They had been ready for closure, ready to finally see him held accountable. And now they had to wait again. Christine clenched her fists. He's not walking away this time. He can't. Janelle placed a hand on her shoulder. Patience. Undefined, every lie leaves a trail. Undefined, and his trail is endless. Mary whispered softly, almost to herself. Undefined. Maybe now the world finally sees the man we've always known. Kody slumped in his chair, his gaze frantic, his breathing shallow. Undefined. The walls seemed closer, the lights warmer. the cameras more pointed. Undefined. He spun to Robin, his voice a raw whisper. Undefined. You were supposed to be by my side. Undefined. You were supposed to protect me. Robin's eyes welled with tears. Undefined. I didn't leadish. I protected you when nobody else would. You've killed all of us. She walked away from him, her silence more deafening than her words. The judge stood up, his voice absolute. This trial is not over. New evidence leads to new proceedings. We will resume in good time. His gavel came down one final time. The courtroom exploded as everyone moved to leave, their voices erupting into a frenzy. But at the center of it all was Kody Brown, slumped shoulders, his face hidden in his hands. The kingdom he had built falling apart brick by brick in front of the world. Undefined. He was not free. And he was not condemned. Not yet. But the silence that trailed him out of that courtroom was deafening. A silence that bore the weight of a story left untold. A silence that vowed the battle for Coyote Pass and for justice was far from over.